Well, good
All
morning,
right.
Lisa. How are you?
Good morning, and Nate. I am fantastic. And
So, what you got?
don't know anything about it. I'm super excited about it, actually. Like a lot of the things that we talk about, I get ideas from podcasts and book, and some of them I think are worthy of discussing. And this one I would actually love your initial reaction and thoughts on. So I'm reading this book, and it's about developing communication skills, and particularly in relation to managing and leading other people, an area that I think a lot of people can grow. And I continue to try and put effort into it. And the topic is around having difficult conversations, or conversations where you're trying to foster ideas or some sort of solution out of them. And the question that you're supposed to ask, according to this book, which is interesting, is, and what else? And so the thought process is, people are generally not super forthcoming.
Yeah.
Have an initial conversation. The best ideas aren't always laid out. And so instead of inserting your own advice, your own opinions, or your own perspectives at that moment when the person finishes talking, you simply just say, and what else do you have to say? What other ideas do you have? And it forces them to continue to talk, essentially. And
Yeah.
eventually, if you ask that two or three more times, they'll get to a point and they'll say, there isn't anything else. And then you can say, awesome, thank you. These are all great ideas, or this is all great feedback. How does that land for you?
Sounds like you've been living in corporate America for a while, which is great. Um, those are skills that are given to and trained on for employees. I think, listen, I think it's valuable to do that. But I think there are also two types of people that I have come across in the workplace. I'm not saying everybody falls into the two, but I definitely think it's dependent upon the individual. I have, and I've managed many people across a variety of different industries. There are people that are extroverted and just need to talk to get information out of their heads. And then there are people who just kind of are in the background and they're not really passionate about the topic. They're just kind of there, and trying to extract information from both of those types of people is a very different experience. Just the what else you got type thing, I have found doesn't work for most people, because most people, quite frankly, want to be led. They want direction. And so if they're not forthcoming with information, either they haven't thought about it, or it feels like a surprise and they're not ready to like get their brain going. And there's a lot of things that I believe people can do leading up to the conversation that you're trying to have. Like, I think there has to be some framing, and I think there's some steps that need to be put in place a couple of days, a week, even an hour ahead of the meeting, just to make sure that everybody's time is used effectively. I.e., you're not walking into a meeting and being like, hey, we need to brainstorm all these ideas. What do you got? And most people aren't going to respond well to that, in my experience. And on the flip side, there are people that are extroverts that just like to talk. And you will spend a whole hour listening to somebody talk on all sorts of tangents that are, quite frankly, maybe not relevant. Maybe they're ideas, or they started as ideas, but then they kind of go in a direction that needs to be corralled a little bit. There needs to be some structure and maybe some guidance in terms of like what you're trying to get for. So to me, I actually think the conversation is, what can you do before that meeting, and that before that question comes up, and potentially afterwards. So as an example, if you're dealing with introverts, and these are most of the people that I have worked with. I've dealt with both extroverts and introverts in the workplace. I think introverts are much harder to get information out of, but I think they are sleepers in terms of their creative ideas. I think they believe, I don't have any worthy ideas, or, this isn't really worth saying, but actually it's good. And you're just trying to get them to talk a little bit, to participate and interact. To me, that is, hey, 2 days before, I'll send an email, hey, this is what we're trying to accomplish. I'm stuck here. I try to say like, hey, I need your help. Like, this is where you can really help bubble up, some creative juices. And I really do try to frame it in that way. Hey, be creative. There's nothing wrong here. It's a safe space. I'm just stuck. I need your help. I know you're really good at this type of stuff. An hour or two before, I'll fire it off. Hey, hope you're thinking, like, I'm really excited for this. Like, so they start to realize like, hey, you're going to be put on the spot. Like, you need to come and talk. I'm not just going to sit there and talk over you, and to have you just say yes to everything I say. Like, I don't want that. So I really try to frame it up ahead of time. And then sometimes what I'll do is if it is on the spot or we need a little bit more time and I can sense they're still really struggling, I'll say, hey, think about it for another 24 hours. I'm going to come find you tomorrow and we're going to talk about this just real brief, 15, 20 minutes, but I want to flush this out a little bit more. See if there's anything else that comes to you. And then I give them a little bit more time to think about it. And in doing kind of that broader sense and giving them the structure, but very specifically saying, I need you to participate. I need you to comment. I'm out of options. My brain isn't working. Like whatever you want to say to kind of put the onus on them of like how they can be a bigger part of that vision in that conversation. That to me, I think gets people a little bit more out of their shell and conversing in a discussion that you want to have.
Yeah, those are great points. What other strategies have you used to get people talking or to identify other solutions?
I've seen and held brainstorming sessions with groups of people. So instead of one-on-one, just getting other people to flow. Again, that typically takes a variety of personalities. If everybody's an introvert, most of the people are just going to look at their phones. I think whiteboarding in that instance is useful, even in today's virtual world where it's like, hey, everybody put your phone away, close all other browsers. We're going to whiteboard together. I want to hear 2 to 3 ideas coming from everybody. I'm just going to go around the circle, who wants to start. So the calling on exercise where you're bouncing ideas off of other people is very helpful. And I think just getting people to write things down, send me an email, explain this a little bit more, or, if you're in person, write it down on a piece of paper. I just think sometimes people need a little poking, right? It's like, hey, this is not an option. Like you're not here just to like spend 30 minutes sitting in a chair. You actually need to come to the table with some ideas, and setting that expectation in whatever type of environment you set up is the way to go. Now, the environment can definitely enhance that, but I think again, it has to be structured pretty aggressively.
Okay, so you're structuring aggressively to get people to talk and to share ideas. And once you've hit that place, let's say you've got a bunch of ideas on the table, what do you do with people to help them make decisions on how to make a decision on what to move forward or how to define priorities that they've brainstormed?
So we'll look at the overall problem that we're trying to solve, whatever that is, and then list out the options that came up. Hey, Lisa mentioned this, Francis mentioned this, Mary mentioned this. I think there's 2 here. One, what are our top 3 that we like, that we want to pursue? I think your question is really valid because at the end of the day, you want people to focus their energies, right? You don't want to give them analysis paralysis. So you really have to drill down and say, hey, we're going to really focus on this one or 2 things, and then we're going to move in that direction. And then if these don't work, we're going to try 3 and 4. So I think it's, hey, let's prioritize this. Which one do we think is going to be the most effective? Like, let's give our feedback, and then let's talk about why. And then once we have the whys, we can figure out, all right, who's going to be the lead on this? How can we divide and conquer? If that's a thing, right? Maybe you don't have enough time to be able to do that, but who's the responsible party for that, and make sure that gets assigned to that person within that meeting. So there are no questions leaving the meeting around alignment and the responsible party.
Awesome. Thank you for participating in my experiment. I just got you to talk for 12 minutes.
And what's your feedback on all of that? What did I not say that you've seen work?
No, I wanted to give an illustration because I think, and I think it's where you started as well, is when you frame the question as, and what else, people don't think outside the box, but you can actually frame that question in different ways, like I tried to do. Well, how else would you get people talking? How would you get people to align? And so just when you're having conversations with people, whether it's people manage it, whether it's you and I having a conversation about business, and the goal is to continue to get people to think about a problem, hold back from inserting your own information and your own advice, and continue to pose that question in different ways, but ultimately lead someone down the path of where you want them to go to come to that endpoint that you need information on. So
Yeah.
short little exercise of fun.
No, and it worked well, but I think your key takeaway, because when he first framed it was, and then just say what else, but it's not what else because people get tired of the question. I think it
That's
really
correct.
is, to your point, it's then you start to go down the path of pulling together the necessary steps or resources or whatever else you're trying to get out of the solution set that you're creating. So continuously asking question, but it's not just why, what else, what else, what else. There are very specific
No,
endings to the questions to help lead people through the process.
yep, you're absolutely right. So know where you're headed and then Start the conversation, ask the question in various forms to help direct the conversation without looking like you are inserting your opinion or your own perspective over someone else's. And you'll probably get some pretty good feedback.
I love it. Well, it worked on me, so hopefully it works for everybody else.
All right. Thanks,
All
Nick.
right.
We'll talk
See you
to
later.
you soon. Bye.